Greetings, comic book lovers, and welcome back to Casually Comics, the channel where we chat all things comics, from reviews of comics new and old, to history, to anecdotes, to really wherever our whims take us. And today, that's interviews. We're going to be talking with Maurice Devereaux, film director turned comic book author. He has a series of graphic novels coming out called Clan of the Devil, the Sonnie Bean Saga. I have book one with me right here. It's still bagged and boarded. I've read it, but the digital copy. I will open this after. I also have 4 copies of the first issue in single format, bagged and boarded, and I am going to be giving them away. So if you want to figure out how to get on that, you gotta stay right to the end. Proper YouTube stuff. So Clan of the Devil has its roots in the legend of Sonnie Bean and has taken a lot of research to come to fruition. It plays in some interesting territory and is also graphic. It says on here, warning, this publication is for mature readers, and it means it. It's not playing around. It's not one of those warnings where you go through the entire thing and you're like, that was it? Why were they warning me? Nah, we're talking gore. Someone's getting beheaded on the cover. People get eaten, of course, because it's cannibals. It would be disappointing if they didn't. And there is plenty of sex, both willing and unwilling. All of the things. It earned its rating is what I'm saying. Some of you are like, where's that link? But it's also a thoughtful and historical piece full of political intrigue and backstabbing and lots of details. It's something that's stuck with me, so I'm very excited to share this discussion with all of you. The project is currently on Kickstarter. It's not funding because it's complete. This is an order system. So if you are interested, you can just go to the Kickstarter link, which I have below, and you just place an order and it will come to you. There's also a cinematic trailer down there, so if you want to check that out to see what it's all about. And now, without any more preamble, on the discussion. Greetings, comic lovers, and welcome back to Casually Comics. We are obviously doing something a little different today. I'm very excited to say that we are doing an interview with Maurice Devereaux. We're going to be talking about his book, Clan of the Devil, which I'm very excited about. This interview has been a long time coming, but I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here, Sasha. I love your show. And my book is called Clan of the Devil, the Sonnie Bean Saga. And I've been working on it full time for the last 8 years. So volume 1 has just been printed and is ready to launch to sell. It's on Kickstarter right now. And it's been quite a journey, and it'll be really cool to talk about it with you. Since you've read it, you're actually almost my first reader.
I really enjoyed it. There's a lot going on in it. I have to say, having read the entire first book, like there's a lot of information packed in the best of ways. So even though it's, I'm going to say only, no, it's not only 113 pages, like there's so much going on. Like I mean that in that it feels like there's so much encompassed inside of it. So for those who haven't had the benefit of reading it yet, why don't you give a brief synopsis of what it's about?
It's about the legend of Sonnie Bean, who was the head of a big family, inbred family of cannibals who in 16th century Scotland would attack passersby at night, drag them back to their caves and eat them. And supposedly they did this for 25 years and killed over 1,000 people until King James and his army finally captured them. And so this legend was only a 6-page story that was published in the early 1700s. And a lot of people think it's just a myth, completely a myth. And some other people think it's actually based on something true. And I've been doing research for many, many years. And because when I read the initial 6 pages, what caught me, it wasn't, that it was true or not, wasn't really the thing that grabbed me. It was, if it was true or not, the thing is, the children of Sonnie Bean, they lived cut off from society. So for them, the outside world would be the villains because what they were doing in their minds was not wrong. So that really caught me. And it's like, oh, it's like a cult. So that angle of it was like, oh my God, I have to tell this story through the point of view of one of the children of the clan. And I was like, oh yeah, that'll turn the whole myth around where it's the outside world that are the villains. And even if some films have been adapted from this story, but they've been like modernized, like Wes Craven did The Hills Have Eyes, and he transported it into the deserts of Nevada in the 70s. But there's never been a period accurate telling of this story, surprisingly. And so I'm the first one to tackle this. And it's been quite a big epic because the more I studied and learned about the history of that time period, there was a lot of fascinating stuff, and I kept reading book after book after book. And And so long answer to the
No, it's
first question.
good. It was one of the things that I noted right away was the perspective that you start from. And so even though you're starting from that perspective, you also see the horrifying things that they're doing. So it's a very interesting juxtaposition because it plays with the fact that because they are the protagonists, you do kind of want to sympathize with them, then you're also seeing all of these things at the same time. But it was still, I think, a very interesting choice because then when you hop on over to James, the nobility, and all of the stuff that's going on there, they somehow managed to come across as almost in a way like worse in a different way, which I found very, very fascinating. So how did you find the balance of working with that kind of really visceral horror versus like the political intrigue side of it?
Discovering that it was linked in many ways because King James started a big witch hunt in 1590, and which is absolutely horrifying in its own way. So to have both of those elements sort of play off each other, where people who would just go, oh, these cannibals and blah blah blah, but even on the nobility side, horrible things and acts were being committed, be it for God or religion or political reasons, whatever. So in a way, not that it justifies any of these acts, but it sort of puts it in context that no one is completely a saint, in the whole story. So
when I was going through, I saw that there are multiple different art styles, and that really intrigued me because I like all of them. So what was the decision behind having some of those like poster pages and having some of the like more traditional comic book art style?
the thing with my initially, of course, my goal was, if I'd had just one artist, that would have been fantastic, because I know a lot of people, once you get a certain art style, it's easier for the reader to just follow. But my project was so big, and also I had started, I hired a first artist. We did 6 pages together, and then and when I say I hired, these are all people from other countries, because sometimes you hire people, and so it's like I ended up working with people from like 12 different countries. So, and my first artist, after 6 pages, left the project. What reason? He didn't really give any, but I was paying a fair amount per page, but there's always better offers, or maybe he was more interested in something else. Who knows? So he left. So then I restarted with another artist from page 1. So then I was paying again from page 1, pages that I had already paid for, but because I wanted to have, the same artist doing everything. So then I got to page 10, and this second artist wrote me this huge letter saying why he had to leave the project. And what was more funny in this case was that he gave a reason, was he was very superstitious, and he was working on the project. Many weird things were happening, and some of his friends and family got sick. Things were falling in the night, and blah blah. And so I was like, well, whatever. I mean, it might just be an excuse to get out of it again. But for me, it made me laugh because, of course, it'll make a good story.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then I had to start a third time from page 1. And then I was saying, no way am I gonna, if this artist leaves for whatever reason, I'm just going to continue with another artist at wherever they left off. And then also, because it wasn't advancing as fast as I wanted, I said, okay, I started to hire many artists to work on different chapters at the same time, thinking that, well, it'll be the only way to get this done in my lifetime. And if any of one artist leaves, then I just continue with the others, hire a new one. And so it ends up being a bit of a Frankenstein, where you have multiple artists sometimes even in the same chapter. But it's something I've had to come to peace with, and I hope readers will still find it enjoyable, even if, yes, there might be sometimes not necessarily jarring differences between the art, but there will be. So I say it's variety. And Slice of life, you know.
I have to say that I really like the poster pages because it kind of felt like they were almost bookending it, because those were always for like those really big moments. So for me personally, like at least it worked. So hopefully it'll work for others as well. How did you decide that you wanted this to be a comic book?
Well, the thing is, you know, it's such a big scope story and taking place, of course, in 16th century Scotland. To do it as a movie, you know, because my first idea was to do it as a movie, and I had written a screenplay, and this was in 2002, and it would have been really expensive to do as a movie. And at that time, it was like, you know, even if I've always bit off more than I can chew with my movies, like being too ambitious, this one was really ambitious. So I put it aside and I did another feature called End of the Line. And after End of the Line, it kept coming back to me, this story. And a friend of mine had, you know, delved into comic books, and I grew up loving comic books. I had a huge collection. I actually had over like 10,000 comic books when I was like 18 years old. And I sold all of them to help finance my first film. So, but you know, I've always been sort of attached to the comic book world. So I started to think, well, maybe I could adapt it into a comic book. So then, as I was rereading it, I started to do a bit more research, and I discovered a few things that at the time weren't available. And reading these new things, it's like, oh my God, I have to write about this. And it kept expanding. And then, of course, it wasn't a movie anymore. It would be more like a 3-season miniseries, you know. So then doing it in a series of graphic novels became the more feasible way of getting all of this story out and finished. But, you know, their movies and comic books are kind of close cousins, meaning lots of the skills that you learn when you're making movies are very adaptable to comic books, meaning you have to think visually when you're doing your storyboards and saying, okay, I'm going to do this shot, this shot, this shot. So I'd be doing the same thing with my artists, going, well, I'd be being like the costume designer, because I'd be finding in like libraries, you know, old paintings of costumes and sending them, okay, this is the costume for this character, this is the castle, this is the location, this is the weapon. So everything I was researching, I'd be giving it to them, and then also saying, well, on this page, you know, for panel 1, I'd want a close-up of this and then a wide shot. So it kind of felt like I was directing, even if there, you know, it's still a different medium. It felt very comfortable still, you know.
There definitely are some through lines for sure, particularly like you said with the storyboarding. And I found that because I did watch End of the Line, and I found that your style is very similar from that film to this comic. And I noticed you favor a very kind of visceral style of horror. So where does that come from? That love of that kind of, you know, intense graphic horror?
You know, as a spectator, I'm a fan of all kinds of movies. You know, be it even just an Eric Romer, a French talkie that is sort of like just like a Woody Allen, just two people talking for 2 hours. So I like all kinds of movies. But of course, as a kid, I did have always a sort of fondness for horror movies, like being scared, and I loved sci-fi as well. But for horror, of course, you know, you have more subtle horror, and then you have horror with gore. I love them all. It's just it ends up that for the films I did, the gore elements were needed, and if they're needed, well, we're going to go for it. So, and you know, so it's a bit like, well, you know, if gore is a spice, well, you know, meals with a bit of spice are always a little fun. So anyway. But yeah, guilty as charged.
This definitely does have that. Do you ever worry that it might be too off-putting for some, or are you very clear on the vision that you want?
Well, you know, here's the thing, you know, it's like for sure the subject matter from the get-go, it'll be a smaller percentage, because, you know, it's like, well, if you're going to go read a book about a family of inbred cannibals that eat people, if you're going to be easily offended or shocked, you shouldn't be even opening, you know, this book. You know, so, and the thing is, I was very, very happy when I started to watch Game of Thrones, because I had already been working on my book for many years, and Game of Thrones sort of was like a revelation for me that, oh my God, there might be a bigger public for my story than I thought. because Game of Thrones goes all out with gore and sex and incest and shocking moments, and people who might not have been into that still really enjoyed it. So it's always surprising that there, what I thought might be more of a niche thing actually might not be as niche as I thought, but still, for sure, if you're easily offended, stay. I put, a big mature intended for, adult audiences on the cover. We've all been warned.
So this is book one. How many books are you planning on putting out?
Okay, so there's 12 books, and each with about between 110 and 125 pages each. So they're all done, except for they need to be colored and a few pages need to be inked, but they're all drawn. So I'm hoping to have each issue come out every 3 to 4 months. So every book to come out, so this one is out now and it can be ordered, and I'm hoping to bring the next one out maybe in 4 months, so maybe at the end of summer, and then go from there, one every 3-4 months. So yeah.
Has this whet your appetite to do even more comics, or is this your big comic project?
Who knows what's going to happen afterwards, but for sure it's been it's liberating in the sense that when you write a screenplay, you're putting a lot of work into it. And if that screenplay doesn't become a movie, it just ends up in your drawer. It's heartbreaking because it's not considered like a finished work of art. So it just remains unknown. And I wrote many screenplays that unfortunately didn't become movies. And, one after the other, that it gets you down, So when I decided to do the comic book, it was a way to combat that, of course, the end dream would be that I go back to film and with this as a miniseries, and I'd get to bring it to be live action TV show. But even if it didn't, it'll still be a finished work of art that can be read and be out there. And that was the most important thing. And of course, it will be something I will definitely stick with in the future, finance permitting. Because of course, their comic books are less expensive than movies, but they're still expensive.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So now that you've spent so much time researching this, you said at the start of this that like some people think it's true, some people don't. Which are you leaning more towards now that you've done so much research?
I am absolutely convinced that the Sonnie Bean legend is not based on nothing, meaning it is tied. And there's too many, even in the short little 6-page story, there's too many clues referencing real events that are fact, meaning I have trial records from the 16th century, actual trial records and stuff. And it's like, oh, when I was seeing so many things link up, it was like, how much of it is true, that, is not easily provable. But one thing is, it's not just out of thin air. They are talking about, because there's been many variations of the first original short story, but the earliest one puts the date clearly at King James VI, because it says when King James was King of Scotland and Queen Elizabeth I was Queen of England. And that puts the dates very squarely in my timeline. And what happens is that when you start reading about King James and what he was involved with, there's a lot of things that connect. Well, I'll give you one of the big ones, is that in the original Sonnie Bean legend story, it just says that Sonnie Bean came from a town 11 miles east of Edinburgh. Well, if you Google map towns 11 miles east of Edinburgh, you have a town called Tranent. And Tranent is the town where most of the witches that were accused of conspiring against King James were from, and were put to the stake and jailed and killed. So that cannot be a coincidence. It cannot, meaning specifically the person who wrote this was basing themselves on those events in part. So to what point? Well, that's what I discovered while reading and reading. It's like that, oh my God, this fits as well. And there were so many things that were lining up. It's like, okay, there's some creepy coincidences here. It might be a bit of a spoiler, but it doesn't matter. It's like it's so much fun. It's like in actual court documents and even speeches from the king and all sorts of things I was finding in archives and the universities in Scotland and England, it says that some of the witches that had been captured in 1590 had escaped. And King James sent his witch finder to track them down. And it was like, okay, so if you had someone who was on the run from the law and cannot rejoin society because they'll be captured and killed, would that be a good excuse to live in a cave away from? It's like, yes, it would, because the original story had no motivation. It just says, he was a bad guy and he just left and started to, kill people. Well, that would be a good motivation, wouldn't it? That you can't live in society because you're a wanted man, and you will be put to death if you were part of the witch, and also when I say witches, of course, they were innocent because witches don't exist, in the terms of, but anyway, so that's all part of this, and since you saw the way I'm constructing each book is that you have the story of Sonnie Bean and his family once he's older and he has 3 generations of his family, of his inbred family, but I also go into his origin when he's a young, teenager. It becomes a bit that you're following both storylines and they'll eventually meet up. And that's again one of the clues is that when the witches escaped in 1590, if you count the years, it's so funny because King James became King of England in 1603 and he left Scotland, never to return except for once in 1617. He returned to Scotland, which makes it roughly 25 years after the witches escaped. So again, you have a weird thing because when King James returned to Scotland, there was a log, like a royal official log of every visit he was doing during that time in 1617. And there's one part that it says, King James left for a big hunting trip. And that's the only information. And it's right there in the official royal logs. And then you have in the original Sonnie Bean story that he killed people for 25 years until King James with his soldiers captured him. 25 years. If it had been 18 or 33 or whatever, it wouldn't have fit with the actual dates that I was discovering. So when I found that date, I was like, oh my God, I don't even have to pretend. It's like, it's like, this matches up. It matches up. It's like, this is incredible. So there's many, many, many things like that I was like, oh boy, okay. So for whoever was a, pro Sonnie Bean, it really existed, there will be so much stuff in my book that will go, well, look, this fits. And on my side is like, well, if he didn't, okay, but if he did, this is how it happened. My story will be, if he did exist, this is it. I filled the gaps with, the entire story, everything I could find that was facts and proof is in it. And then if there was anything missing, I would fill it in with what could be plausible. And that's how I constructed the story. That added a layer of challenge because many times in many movies with history, they just do whatever they want.
They wing it.
It's like, like let's say Brian De Palma's The Untouchables. At the end, Kevin Costner grabs a goon and just throws him off a building and kills him. In actuality, that goon was a real, that goon character was a real person who became a bigger mob boss than Al Capone. But the movie says, no, we want a big hurrah
dramatic
moment. So
moment.
who cares about real facts? So I understand many times movies do that because real life is more complex, and it's not as neat and tidy. So movies, they sort of simplify and add things to make it more fun, let's say, or more entertaining. I tried to all the facts that I found to put them in and build around that.
So in that way, did you find working in the comic medium a bit more freeing, or like just giving you different options?
It's freeing in the sense that since I'm paying for it, no one's telling me what I can and can't do. So it's freeing in the sense that if, of course, it had been a movie or a TV series, there'd be all these considerations, be it budget-wise or this or that or et cetera, that could force certain changes upon you as the creator. No, there's very few creators on multi-million-dollar movies that have complete control over everything. You just have to look at Zack Snyder, everything that happened with Justice League. It's like it's very rare that a sole creator has final cut, final say on everything. That is more reserved to usually authors of books like George R. Martin. He had complete control of his books, but not the TV show. Hence the differences that will be in the TV show. So for this comic book, since it's all me, it's completely my decision. So yes, it's freeing in that sense. It's like because I could make things that maybe would never be done because it's not necessarily the most profitable thing to do. Meaning, well, look, this scene, it might be interesting, but it would cost a lot and it could be cut out, and I'd have to agree. As a filmmaker, I'd probably agree. So, but for the book, I was like, you know what? I think it's cool. So even if it's sort of like a little tangent, I think it's interesting and I'm going to put it. So it ends up being something unique, I think. I think except for independent comics, most of the major comics from DC or Marvel, it's a bit the same thing. The creators are sort of hampered by, be it the canon of each company's legacy, and also just directives from higher ups, so they're never truly completely free to do whatever they want.
How have you found like setting up the whole working on Kickstarter and all of that jazz? Because when you started writing this, I think those things were just coming up. So how has that been?
Well, I didn't use it. I didn't even think of using it. For me, my first goal was just to finish it entirely before even getting it out there. And the only reason I sort of broke that was because of the pandemic and everything. And at one point I said, okay, well, I'm close enough to the end that I can maybe start. Because here's the thing, working on a huge comic book like that is a lot of work. There's a lot of work to do. And selling a book, marketing a book is a lot of work. And I didn't want to be doing both those things at the same time. So that's why I sort of pushed it away till I had it finished, which is not the case for usually Kickstarter projects. They're asking for money to do something.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. And if they don't get the money, then the project won't exist. In my case, the Kickstarter, I'm using it more to promote the book and say, well, look, it's done. Once you order it, you'll be getting it, next, as soon as the campaign ends in a few weeks, I'll be shipping you the book, So it was more because using Kickstarter in that way makes it that if the project becomes popular on Kickstarter starts to sort of promote it to other people who have backed similar comics.
Yeah.
So it would introduce it to people I don't know who might be interested in my book and might want to purchase it. So that's why I went and used it now. But, in a way also is that if I had tried to use it years ago to try and raise funding and this and that, it's been such a difficult process to get the book done. It would have broke my heart if I had to tell people, oh, my artist left me. The book's going to be delayed.
All the updates and
all these things that in this way, the buyers will be getting, right away whatever they pay for, and there'll be no disappointments except for maybe the book itself. But
well, I don't think so. I really liked it.
Okay, cool. But definitely you'll be the first person I send book 2 to in a few months. So, but yeah, so pretty much that's the thing with Kickstarter. So using it to promote more than to, well, I mean, the funds I do raise are going back to help me, because I paid everything out of pocket.
Yeah.
All these artists, colorists, inkers, it costed a lot. So I went all in, to use a poker term, So I do need the money coming back.
So you mentioned you were working with a whole bunch of different creators and artists and globally. So how did the pandemic affect that? How did it affect your workflow?
Well, surprisingly, it didn't affect it at all, because it was all through the internet and working with people just by email. So it surprisingly did not slow it down in any way. So, and I'd never asked one of my artists, but, it might have even increased production, because if he had another job at the same time and that one was shut down, then he might have had more time for mine. So it might have even accelerated things. It didn't change the workflow, let's say.
Mm-hmm. So I have 2 different versions of your book here. They're on my lap. I have the book 1 itself, and then I have the floppy or the single, because people get mad at me when I call it floppies. But so how exactly?
That's what they're called. That's what they're called.
I know. So how exactly is it going to come out? So you have the books. So how's that going to work?
Well, for people who just want to read the story, then it's the book 1 sort of graphic novel. That's 110 pages. Then you get the full book 1. The floppies are actually just the first chapter, which is 36 pages. And those I put out more for what I call the comic book collectors, who are into variant covers, and because I don't think I had them when I sent it to you, but there's also different covers.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so there's one with Sonnie Bean and one with Camille Bean, and there's going to be eventually one that's just like a sketch cover done by different artists that's blank. And all these are more for collectors who want that special low print run, because each of the different covers, there's one that has only 25 copies printed, one that has only 100. So it becomes more for the collectors than the readers. The readers, if you want to just read, then it's the graphic novel, book 1, the 110 page one, the one you were holding up, So yeah, so this, for a reader, that's all you need. The rest is more for collectors and speculators and investors. Because that's the thing. For people, that's not something that's part of your channel, but there's a lot of comic book channels that's all they talk about is, speculation. Because of course, if my comic ever became a TV series, good Lord, then those floppies will be through the roof worth, in price. That's just the way it happens. It's it's crazy. Something is killing the children.
Yes.
That book is a very recent book. So you bought that book for $3.99 or $4.99, whatever. And now, because it's the TV show, if you've got a perfectly 9.8 copy, it's selling for $1,000. So that's a whole other market. So I wanted to cater to both. Meaning, well, if you just want to read, then you have the book 1 and it's complete. But for the potential speculators, investors, well, I got you covered. It's for all your investing needs, take a gamble. I will be working to make this into a series, so it's a good hedge on your bet.
Well, I mean, you said that you were able to parlay your collection into being able to finance your film. Have you ever rebuilt it or started to recollect it?
No, I never did. But yeah, and it's that's the thing is, it took years to build it, and then afterwards I was more into film and other things, so I never became a collector. But yeah, you don't want to think about if I had kept them, how much they'd
No,
be
you can't
worth.
play that game. You can
You
never
can't.
go look at what they're worth now. It's like, no.
No. But actually, on a side note, it's a little anecdote, but I did receive some of my old comics through a really strange way, because I had lived with a roommate for years in the basement of his aunt's, and I had my comic books there, but I sold them all. But I had forgotten a box that it was mislabeled like income tax returns. It was like in a box of it. And years later, they were moving and they found that box and recontacted me. So I did get back a box of my old comics and was astounded to see the values today. So yeah. So, but no, I don't have any of personal collections anymore. Who knows? One day, maybe. They're fun, but
they can be an investment. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So, what was your favorite part of this process? What was your favorite part about working on this?
It's when I receive a drawn page, and as soon as I open it and I see it, that, oh my God, it's perfect. It's like, that's exactly what I was imagining. It's a bit like, when I was doing my first movies, pre-digital, because I'm an old dinosaur, we'd have to wait till the rushes, the film negatives were developed, and then it would take a while before you'd see what you shot, So I'm sort of getting back a bit of that feeling where I send, the scripts and the page, the breakdowns of what I want. And then when I open up the drawn page, I do get that kick, because I'm seeing it for the first time. It's like, wow, oh, cool, sometimes there's little things that I need to adjust, and but it is a fun part of the process, is seeing it come to life. And of course, then when all the other elements are there with the color and everything, it's just, there's always a feeling of, when you've been working on something for a long time, to finally get it out there is always a good part of the process as well. But I think for me, it's just seeing the pages. For me, it's already like taking something that was in the mind and like, it's real now. It's real now. It's real now. And that's a lot of fun. That's because, yeah.
Did you have a favorite character? Because I really liked Camille, like going through it. I really just was enjoying her story.
Yeah, well, for sure, you're still at the beginning with book one. There's going to be a few other characters that are coming, and there'll be some surprises where characters have arcs and develop and go in weird directions and stuff like that. But as a creator, I think, and I can't quote, this is not from me, I've read this before, but I just loved it, and I don't remember who said this, but it was a creator who said, I love all my characters. And I think it's important, because if you when you love your characters, be it a villain or a hero or whoever, the word love means you care. And if you care, you'll be doing everything to make them as interesting as possible, even if they're a secondary character. So I think, of course, there's some that are more predominant, and you put more into them and you get more attached, as the reader will. But as a creator, I think it's important to even, the villains and the this and, all the, to put everything you can into each one. But if I'd have to answer who's my favorite character, holy cow, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I think, villains are always interesting if they're good. Most good movies are usually, if they have a great villain, usually it brings the whole movie up. And of course, superhero movies are the same. I think most people, without even noticing, if they think of their favorite superhero movies, it's usually the ones that had the best villains in them as well. Because if you have like a weaker, uninteresting villain in the movie, the movie could still be fine, but it's usually, when you have that great villain, then it pumps up everything, So of course, I have a good villain that you've only met briefly in the last few pages of book one, he'll be, it's Bailey Seaton, the Witchfinder, who will become a big player in the whole arc, and he's something, and he's gonna.
And that's one of the fun things, because it would be easy to assume going into this, like, oh, the cannibals, so obviously, but it's not, it's not that clear cut, and that's one of the things that I enjoyed about reading it, was that I think for some it will be a surprise, because let's be going in expecting cannibals and gore, and you will get that, but there's also more to it than that.
Yeah, and I think and that's why the analogy with Game of Thrones again would be that if someone just wanted to watch Game of Thrones because, oh, there's ice zombies in it, or dragons, well, if that's all he's interested in, he'll be pretty disappointed, because for most of it, you have a lot of just character stuff and political backstabbing and this and that. And then suddenly there's a little mention, oh, yes, there's ice zombies that might be coming. And then you see one shot, and then that's it for that season. So if, let's say, someone was only interested in ice zombies or dragons, if someone just wants wall-to-wall cannibalism, they will be disappointed. I'm sorry. But that's it. It does end up being just part of a larger story. But, all I can say to them is, well, okay, there'll be lots of pages, no cannibals, but there's going to be lots of torture and people burnt at the stakes and lots of sex and violence and I of course that doesn't match cannibalism. We all know that. Can't once again, don't get too full on the cannibalism. It's best in small doses. What's the Atkin diet? The Atkin diet? Just meat? It's not too good for you.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with this. Tell the people verbally, and I'll put links and descriptions where they can get this.
Well, right now they can order it on Kickstarter. So if they go on Kickstarter and just go Clan of the Devil, the Sonnie Bean saga, hopefully it'll pop up very quickly, but there'll be your link. And so you could watch, there's a trailer, and there's a very cinematic trailer, and they could watch that. And so thank you so much. It's really appreciated, and I hope you had fun, and we'll be doing this for volume 2 maybe one day.
No, thank you for reaching out. I really enjoyed it. So cool. I'm going to say bye-bye to the comic peeps.
Bye-bye. I love your bye-bye.
Hello, you made it to the end. I'm glad to see you. I hope that you found that as fascinating as I did. I'm a big fan of listening to people talk about stuff that they're passionate about, and I find this kind of playing in the realm of the historical very, very interesting. I love legends, exploring them, yes. So if you're interested in entering to win a chance to get one of these 4 issues, well, here's what you gotta do. You gotta be publicly subscribed to this channel. You gotta leave a like, and you've got to drop a comment. I want to hear your favorite cannibal or your best cannibal pun or joke. Leave those comments, like, subscribe, and I will throw them into a random comment generator. And if you're selected, I will be replying to you and getting in touch with you. If you're interested, please do back this. It's very much a passion project, and it's taken a long time to come together, and I definitely think that it's very, very interesting, and I can't wait to see each part come out and come to fruition. No. I can hear some of you screaming, no, you have the value. It's left the confines. So this beautiful beauty is gonna go onto the shelf. It's gonna have a spot. We're gonna keep it safe. I might keep it in its bag though, just because, it's back there, covered in the children's book. So thanks so much for sticking to the end. I can't wait to hear your favorite cannibals and jokes. I hope you enjoyed this change of pace and content. And if you did, please feel free to talk about it down there and do all the YouTube things. The liking, the sharing, the commenting. And I will see you again soon. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day spent discussing comics with me, listening to this interview, and just spending some time. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.